The rules of playing France. If you stop at 2 TCs, you've thrown the game. If you go beyond that, though, you're a winner. He has 4 town centers. More of the Snake Man. The Viper is blitzing through, looking nigh on unstoppable with a 100% win rate, but he's got a challenge ahead of him. Former Overwatch champion turned AOE4 competitor Nevix stands in his way, and he is going to be whipping out the Chinese, which we know Nevix loves a little bit of. Here or there. I could have sworn in the early days I remember seeing Nevix experiment mainly with Chinese and the English. I might be recalling that incorrectly, but I'm curious to see what it's going to do, because I think the early game of the Chinese has changed a lot with the way they tweaked the cost of Imperial officials and a few of the other metrics like the supervision rates. And the reason I think this is going to be a big deal in this matchup is Nevix has actually been vocal himself that his biggest weakness, the area that he gets tripped up and outdone in time and time again, is his early game. And because the Chinese early game is, in my opinion, a little bit more fickle now, it can be difficult to get that right when you're under pressure. And you will be under pressure because you're playing against the French, a tempo aggressor civ. So let's see what Nevix has got in mind with the opener. Also, keep in mind, actually, one nice thing you have as a Chinese on this map is you can actually build up the defensive walls quicker, right? Like, the Chinese build structure is faster. So you will waste less time than other civs if you choose to rapidly run out and wall yourself in. Just don't do what we watched Leenock do a little bit earlier and forget about a tiny gap on the side. That would be a actually crushing way to lose a game. Nevix just confirming he's a Chinese one trick. I'm not sure he's trolling. I'm pretty sure the first time I watched Nevix, he was playing as the English. I believe it was a game on Highview against possibly Xiao. Missed that guy, by the way. Shout out to Xiao for all the support he showed AoE in the early days. But he's a one-game laddie, and he's gone back to the world of Hearthstone. I don't know why. I mean, you know. Oh, if you thought our map generations were random, you should see how those decks play out. Okay, I'm going to stop being mean to card games. There we go, fired. Never allowed to work any card game ever, no matter what card game it is. Cast and Future ruined. But yeah, opening-wise, Viper, like, the layout of his base, he didn't get the freshest dub on the deer. Like, the dream is if you can get the deer and the berry actually quite close together to minimize, like, the idle time between. But this should be easily extractable. I'm expecting by the time he's finished off the next 2 sheep, him to just move out and set up a mill here. Remember that mills are incredibly cheap for the French. In fact, the resource drop-off buildings are just cheap. You can see it here, 25 wood, where any other civ build costs them 50, right? And then the Rus, their hunting cameras cost them 100. So this is something that's really nice. It allows you to flex a little bit more in your openings. We haven't really seen too much diversification out of the French early builds, but I think this is one cool kind of element to it that allows for that flexibility. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see that utilized maybe a little bit more heavily. Maybe some TC boom. No double TC French, folks. Don't do it. Remember the rule. There's a forbidden rule here. Never build a secondary TC unless you're willing to build a third. That's if you're playing French, by the way. Wonder if Nevix will go for the secondary TC. Opening up here, I wonder if he's going to be baited into the Imperial Academy. The Imperial Academy feels really good here. In theory, with the timings, you should be able to collect your second round of gold quick enough to get a Barbican up afterwards. But there might be a window of opportunity where your opponent strikes in with one or two knights. And yeah, it is going to be the Imperial Academy. I like this play, but he does need to get a wall up, I think, at the front. I think it's crucial you delay the raid times of Viper by an extra 20 to 30 seconds, because that should be the difference between gathering enough for a Barbican and not. And also, once you have that Barbican, you can actually defend a second side. We'll see how this plays out, though. I think the frustration about the Barbican is Sun, and this is another reason why a lot of players won't go for it, even up against tempo aggressive civs like the French, is it just doesn't... It doesn't really stop French Knights, right? A French Knight spammer is just going to run past a Barbican Sun that gets plopped out here or over here away from your base. So it feels like the only way Barbicans really work is when they're condensed, and it almost defeats the point unless you kind of shift them off to the side. Shall we say, for example, if you had one here between the two gold veins. And that did used to be the typical use. When the Chinese were first starting being played, they started to become meta. A very popular play for the Chinese player was to drop a Barbican Sun next to their first resource expansion to try and protect it. The reason being, not because it could necessarily snipe out knights or whatever, but because it was a garrison point. But I think those days have passed because of this building here. The village is actually really nice now. Remember that they changed this so that you can actually build it right away in the Tang Dynasty. It's not only a cost-effective, or time-effective, rather, solution to housing, and cost-effective, as you can see there, right? Giving 4 times the population count, but only costing 2.5. It's the fact that you'll build it quicker than individual houses, because you only need one person building it. And then also, it's a garrison point. So it means instead of needing a barbican here, the village will achieve the same functionality because 1 or 2 knights won't be able to burn it down quick enough. And that means you can do this. Nevix, with the forward move out, barbican makes a lot of sense. Remember, you want to get this early on because once this is up, you get a 35% reduction in the production time of villages, meaning it only takes 13 seconds as opposed to normal 20. And it means also in a 1TC on 1TC situation, you can even out-eco boom the French because right now they're producing every 17 seconds. I'll give you a 4-second advantage. Sound like I'm going basic mass mode there. Charge in. Uh-oh. Luckily for him, there has not been a blacksmith drop just yet. There will be a villager drop. Wow, Nevix. He abandons it. Timing a little bit off. Spearman now coming out. He might even lose a second villager. And it makes you wonder if it was even worth the peel back at that point. He will now return because remember, once this is up, he'll at least start producing villagers quicker. But that is a frustrating strike. An Imperial official. I'm going to focus in on this because Nevix is in the chat right now. Hi, what you doing there, buddy? Been sitting there a long time. Okay, so he's getting the hardened status, but he only has 1 spear. I think this guy is... I don't know, Nevix. I don't know how to tell you this. I think this guy, he lied on his CV. He doesn't know how to Imperial officiate. Because right now, he's just supervising, doing nothing. He'll finally realize it, but that was a lot of wasted time where you could have been gathering tax, or you could have been supervising the gold mine or the mill. That's actually a worrying detail to me, because he only still has 1 Imperial official. I feel like this was actually a forced mistake out of Viper, in that because he came in with that initial knight, and the Barbican didn't go up, Nevix knee-jerk reacted by sending the Imperial official over the racks, and then he didn't clock how inefficient his economy became. Because he should have actually had this Imperial official watching the mill the entire time. And he still would have got, like, once the first Spearman's out, it's still fine. Right? In fact, the reality is by the time he pushed that first Spearman out, the damage was already done with the Knight. It wasn't going to hang around anymore. So it seems small, and it almost seems nitpicky the way I'm highlighting it. But you're actually missing out on a lot. If you think that that's an extra 30 seconds, at least, and we say on average, each villager gathers 40 resource per second, you've got 15 villages here. That's 600 resource a minute in that format, right? And then you could have had an additional 20% on top of that, which is going to be an extra 120. And even if we half that and say it was only half a minute lost, that's still an extra 60 resources. That's still an extra villager or almost an extra spearman, right? So it definitely ripples and adds up quickly. Especially if you're going for these kind of finely tweaked timings where you just want to reach critical mass of spears to hold the choke points. It's slowing you down unnecessarily. You can see the effect of it here. Like, his food is capped at this stage. Meanwhile, Viper's floating a lot. And I think Viper's intent is to probably float towards castle now. I don't think he wants to hang around in feudal for longer than maybe another 5 minutes max. And that means Nevix now has a hard choice. He can either try to boom up in castle, which isn't too often to your advantage in this matchup, or you can sidestep into a secondary TC and wall yourself in. And he is already achieving the walling goal. And I think he does have enough resources on the high ground here for a secondary TC. I think it comes down to whether he gets vision on what his opponent is doing. And right now, Nevix isn't eyeballing his opponent's base, so you won't see this reinvestment into feudal, which means, realistically, if you aren't at least checking if your opponent is doing this, it's too risky to even go for the second town center. It's been moving out. Horseman in the field as well. I like this by Nevix. It gives you a lot of mid-map tempo control. The cool thing you can now do is deny vision. Like, if you're quick, you can actually snipe out the scouts. Remember, scouts only 1.62 compared to the horsemen up at 1.88. Means that you can actually chase them down when they're on your side of the map with 2 of them and kill off the scout. And to be fair, like, it's a pricey investment these days. It's great. Scouts, like, compared to what they used to be, up at 70 food. Not to mention, like, the disruption to your production rates on your knights. It doesn't feel good to go for. So, really important that you do eliminate scouts whenever you go for horsemen. And now more walls going up. Yeah, this feels like Nevix might have a boom intent with secondary TC. The Castle Ace timing would really put him at a disadvantage. You can already see that Viper's almost got the required quantity. And considering he has no one in gold, I feel like Nevix might just go hard on the stone. The only thing that might deter him is the location of this stone, because it is at the front of his base. So potentially the first thing to come under fire. Remember what we highlighted, like French Knights don't care about a Barbican. It's a safe point, but that's literally it. So Nevix thinks his Ville's bugged out a bit. I can check this, and I can almost guarantee that this has happened somewhere. I got a feeling it might have. Let's have a look around. So one issue that Nevix could have ran into here is remember that there is a bug right now where when you have your villagers working on deer and they automatically switch over to sheep, they will get locked into a gathering animation and never return the drop-off. It looks like he might be safe. I haven't found a single villager locked in to the quantity. But the way you can spot this is when you click on a villager, if they're just rummaging and their number isn't moving, then you've got the bug. And I've seen this cost players dearly. In fact, most notably, this happened to Poppy Paw in round 2 of Golden League twice against Marine Lord, and then also in a critical decider game against Lennox. In a French mirror matchup, he had 4 villagers that were just idling because he pro-scout dragged a bunch of deer back to his TC. They were gathering underneath the town center. They switched over to a sheep, and they got locked in and bugged out. So, very important. You need to keep an eye on this. This is another reason why pro-scouts is terrible right now. Don't do it, folks. Because it's so easy to forget about. I think the biggest frustration with this bug as well is it doesn't register as idle villagers. So you don't even consciously register that you're at a disadvantage. The only reason some players catch on that the bug has occurred is because their economy numbers don't add up. And that comes from muscle memory and a lot of gameplay. Yeah, yeah. There you go, folks. Like a pro player is kind of confirms. Nevix is pointing out like he had to actually check multiple times to be safe. It has everyone very paranoid right now. Here we go. Switch over to gold. Nevix, he's going to go for that boom up. And he went on the stone as well. With 3 people, this might be a slow, steady race into a secondary TC. It could also be a play into outposts, into the center. He's floating a lot of food, though. The macro is a little bit off here, unless his intent is to push Mass Palace Guard straight away with the overseeing from the Imperial official. I think what we're seeing here is kind of a miscalibration of the new economy. It feels kind of like what's happened is Nevix has been caught off guard by the change to the Imperial official. Because remember, it costs gold now. In a different scenario where you aren't like gold staffed like this, you would have probably pushed out 3, possibly 4 Imperial officials already. But because of the cost of gold now, notice that Nevix had to hoard it just to get the Castle Ace instead. In the meantime, Knights raid in. Spearman out of position. Left that gap wide open. This is what I mean, that the Barbican is if no consequence, and he raids straight in. Viper striking onto the build force. Astronomical Clock Tower is going to be slowed down here. We'll continue the build. Won't take too long. Remember, the Chinese do build a lot quicker than other civs. But overall, you kind of got to be happy with that. Like, when you look at the eco count, they're neck and neck, and Viper has been teched up ahead of his opponent for a while. He does have options, and what option does he take? It's the secondary TC. So unless Nevix now fixes his own economy, he's going to be behind Viper in the next 5 minutes. I just don't see an easy way in which Nevix comfortably goes second TC without completing this wall in. Because he just saw the raid-in that can occur. Like, his spearmen are way too static, and there's not enough of them. I think he understands that in this situation, he is outmassed, and yeah, there it is. The wall's going to come in now. If you want to make this secondary TC play, you need to complete the enclosure. But this, you may notice the frustration. He has to go wide because he's blocked by the Barbican Sun. And he still has these 2 knights he hasn't addressed. Get textiles. Get textile. Nope, no textiles. Just death. Lancers are starting to come out, but more villagers are going to be bled. And you see how effective it is. Remember, this is the switch as well. This is where the French get really frustrating, because when they're feudal age, the Royal Knights need a lance into a sword strike to insta-kill a villager. Now, 2 knights can just whip out their swords and dish 25 damage each to insta-kill a villager. They don't even need to get the charge off. It's really frustrating to deal with. And that's why a lot of players kind of feel puzzled about how to address the French, right? Like, I've seen plenty of Reddit threads that are like, I'm around 1k elo. How do you beat French? And it's like, it is a simple but effective strategy. If you're dealing with a player that's just half decent on the micro, in those matchups, when it's very hard to kind of track efficient micro and your economy, it's very easy to just hemorrhage villages left, right, and center. You just feel like you're running around in circles and never actually addressing the problem. And that's usually why the solution is, you know, outposts, wall-ins on condensed maps, or spearmen and choke points. The issue I think that happened here for Nevix, by the way, is he just didn't have Spearman guarding the choke points. Remember that those Knights rode in when he was guarding the south side. So just kind of a displacement issue for him there. And look at this out of Nevix. Hello. Carving up territory, are we? Oh, the timing on this, though. Viper. He'll get in. He'll actually get in, and he will kill a few villagers. Oh, boy. Oh, no! Oh, no! Nevix! He didn't wall it properly. He will at least peel back the villagers, though. That was actually so close to being a critical error. Like, I mean, it's still quite a big error, because the issue he now has is he can't gather the food. And also, he's running out. It's only berries left. Second TC is also going to strain his economy further. And also, because you're playing on Hill and Dale, you don't actually have much room on your high ground. Remember, this room is now going to be stretched between your economy and your military district, unless you can push out. So, unless you can reclaim this area, he's in a bit of trouble. And it looks like he can at least complete the wall, but if he doesn't come back and address this, Viper can raid in. It's quite surprising how defensive he is. I think the Snake is currently worried about the spears, because if he engages directly with the Lancers, he will win. Remember that the Royal Knights, after a clash, they get bonus damage for 5 seconds, something that the Lancers do not. Right now, it's a chill state. Look what Viper's done. He's gone for the third TC. There we go, folks. What did I tell you? The rules of playing France. If you stop at 2 TCs, you throw the game. If you go beyond that, though, you're a winner. He has 4 town centers, and Nevix still doesn't know because he's yet to scout. Always be scouting. It's not quite ABC for those that bothered to learn their alphabet, but ABS is just as important here. The fact that he doesn't know, it's a stinger here. I mean, we highlighted an earlier point. Remember that everything about Nevix's mid-game could be informed by what his opponent was doing. He could have actually scouted out whether Viper was tempo aggressing with more troops and then made a choice to boom or match feudal. But instead, Nevix kind of played blind. He got caught off by 3 knights, and then his only choice at that stage is to over-boom his military force to defend, at which point he's behind economically. Like, everything that happened here, you can track back to that lack of vision. The fact that he didn't know what his opponent was doing, the fact that he didn't know that this greedy mother docker had actually started building farmlands in the center of the map, because for the last, I don't even know how many minutes at this stage, Nevix hasn't even seen onto Viper's half of the map. So, there's some questions about what's more efficient, 3 TCs versus 4 French. Remember the French Robin Castle says every 16 seconds. So what you're getting a 20% reduction. So with 4 TCs, you're ending up with 4.8. Song Dynasty on 3 TCs, it's 35% reduction. So what you're getting is essentially a 4 TC in there and a bit. So overall, the French is ahead because you've got, I'd say, 4.2 compared to 4.8. The simplest way to do this, by the way, is identify that there's 13 seconds on one and 16 seconds on the other. So if you add in an additional 3 seconds for each, you then look at the other TC and you see that like you've got a differential of 7 seconds still. So yes, Viper is getting more, a notable amount more villages, and he already was right throughout the game. So yeah, this overboom by Viper is just efficient because his opponent never checked in. And he's also starting to gather up relics. I feel like Nevix's issue here is he's just turtled too much. This is kind of classic Chinese on Hill and Dale, where you play your game very blind, and you think you can just Imperial Age and win. Problem is, you've been behind at every stage, and you remain that way. Viper now making his way up into Imperial Age as the French, and Nevix is nowhere near ready because he's food starved. He's got barely any berries left. He hasn't really been able to access the deer. The transition to farm has only just occurred, and this is a heavy hit. He went for the triple granary. Remember, these granaries aren't necessarily cheap. As you can see, they end up costing you 250 wood each. On top of that, he got 32 farms at 75 wood each. That is a phenomenal burden on your economy. You spent about 3,200 wood to get your food eco sorted. Meanwhile, look in Viper's base. Are you noticing many farms? Like honestly, if this is like Kurt Cobain full rocker hair, this is a Friar Tuck look, right? Like he's barely had to invest in the farms because he keeps booming out into these areas. And because he has more villages and because he's reached critical mass, he can keep doing this for the next 5 minutes without any risk. Even if he loses 10 villages here or there, he instantly replaces them. Something that Nevix still isn't at. And it's why he's still playing very defensive. He still hasn't even gone back for these deer. That's a problem, because College of Artillery is now coming out. The Ford Keep, Viper, looking for the bang for buck here. And Nevix, I mean, the military force, it's not really scaling at an appropriate rate for what's coming. He doesn't have the quality, he needs the quantity. And this is the weakness of Hill and Dale. This is the problem. When people play their defensive high ground too long, this is the point where it stings you. Not only is it a resource drain as you burn up your initial resource deposits in the safe area, you also don't have anywhere to build a base anymore. Just look how much of the space has been used on farms. That's got to be, what, a third of his high ground is farmland. So where are you building a long military line to instantly replace whatever you lose? Because that's the difference, right? Like, if we look at the military production building count, in his base, Nevix has 5 military buildings. He's fixing it now over here. But if you look in the center, Viper, he already has 6, 7, going to make it 8 that are 20% cheaper. Or 25. And even with your reduction down to Spirit Way, your option is Juke Nu. Juke Nu. Juke, no! Don't do this! You're playing against the French. The French like armor. They love armor. If it's not the armor of the Knights, it's going to be the armor on the Arbalatrius. This play doesn't do anything for you. Oh no. Please tell me it's just a logical later game efficiency play when he gets Grenadiers. I'm praying right now he's not going to start queuing up Juke Nu. So far, it's looking good, folks. So far, he's not doing it. But I would at least understand Grenadiers more than I understand Juke Nu here. You can get the damage rather high, and yes, it is. There we go, Grenadier play. Great Wall Gatehouse being built. However, Nevix, it's going to be spotted. The timing on this, no! This is when he's weakest. Movement in. Cannon riding in. Knight sliding, trying to get through the palisade wall. It's so quick to do so. And a flood in onto the eco. And look how much of it is exposed here. So much farmland. No stone walls. No way slowing him down. And Nevix, the standing force, is shrunk. It's only 19 right now. He stopped to try and make room for the Grenadiers. And the first round of Grenadiers are on their way. 16 being queued up. They take time. And in that time, you might lose a lot of ground here. Rush in. Knights looking on the primary TC. Not an optimal target. But Viper, he feels like he can just win this straight away. He hasn't seen a defense force just yet. And look at the flurry of troops coming out. Archers and Knights in tow. There's Archers. Cost-effective solution to maybe sniping out a bunch of Grenadiers. Knights also able to easily gap close upon that range cluster unit. Spearman moving out now. TC already goes down. Primary TC shrunk a little bit further back, but that's going to be a hit nonetheless for Nevix. Less of his base that he can utilize. Remember that this gambit right here, this choice to go into Grenadiers, he doesn't have room for any other transition. Either he wins with Grenadiers or he loses the game because of it. He can't switch into Palace Guard. He can't go into Lancers or Fire Lancers. He just doesn't have the production space anymore. And Viper probably realizes this as well. As soon as he sees the Grenadiers, he's going to understand the investment. He's going to understand that Nevix hasn't extended anywhere. He already knows this because he checked on the south side and he did try to raid into the north before. And Nevix is just parked on the high ground. And Nevix is now out of food. And he's building a keep, but he's not gathering food. He needs food so badly right now. Oh, no. Worst case scenario, remember, these Grenadiers, they require 84 food each. And the small quantity, they really aren't cutting it. It's barely any damage to the Elite Royal Knights. The clustering just isn't working out for him. The trades are going in favor of Viper. If anything, Nevix needs to focus fire onto the Archers instead of the Knights. He's so worried about losing to the front line, he's losing the back line. And it means he's going to lose a hell of a lot more here. Forces out the keep garrison. Farms are not being gathered. Nevix, the food! Think of the food! There's starving children everywhere. Especially in China right now. But don't worry. They have plenty of golden nuggets. However, it's not the kind you get with your breakfast here. It's not food, and it means that he cannot produce anything anymore. And that's looking like mostly a wrap. Nevix bringing in new villagers to get on the farms. While Viper is distracted, but Viper now with a forward outpost. No matter what the game is, no matter where we are, it always comes down to this. And it's so effective as well on Hill and Dale. It's just a starvation of space. It's so easy to forget when we think about food, wood, gold, and stone as resources, and population as a fifth. So often we forget about the sixth, space. And I'm not meaning the final frontier here. I mean the room to do anything. Bombards, focusing it all down. Grenadiers rushing out, trying to deny the villagers. Only 4 pulled on the front, though. In the meantime, more farmland just being shut down. Nevix, less than 100 surplus food. And these people, they've got their food for the winter. They're like, we're going to find new lodging. We don't want to be here anymore. And that, I mean, like, he hasn't called it yet, but it's hard to see a way back. 20 military. Meanwhile, Viper up at 69. It's appropriate because Nevix is completely screwed in this one. But at least he got to take the keep with him.